Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Venture Utah. I'm Cameron Porter, your host with Robin Hood Studios. Now, normally we open the segment with a couple of news stories, but to be honest with you, there was nothing in the news that I wanted to touch with a 50-foot pole. So we're not doing a news story today. We're going to jump right into our guests, which is great because today we have three phenomenal guests for you here today, and we're going to be introducing them one at a time as we bring them on. Our first guest is Brad Hartley, a health insurance broker who is an expert in helping business owners and entrepreneurs get covered. Brad, thank you for being here.
You bet. Happy to be here. Thanks.
So, first question I want to throw out, I just want to dive right into it. For people who are looking at taking the leap from their 9 to 5 with their health benefits to running their own business, what on earth does that look like?
What does that look like?
Yeah.
It's a really good question because so many people have non-traditional jobs nowadays. In the past, our parents would go to work at 8 a.m., come back at 5 p.m., and check in, punch out, and be there and then come home. Well, nowadays, there's all sorts of people that have multiple part-time jobs. People have really good ideas as to what they want to maybe go start, or they get really good in a certain field and say, hey, I could do this myself. Why am I working for somebody else? And so I get a lot of calls from people saying, hey, one of the biggest obstacles in me doing this is I need to understand what health insurance might look like for me and my family, because that has a significant bearing on the cost of me taking that leap. And so a lot of people are held back by that, but a lot of people say, you know what, it's time. And so I get calls saying, hey, what am I looking at? How much is this going to cost? What are the variables that I need to understand? Am I going to still be in the same network? Can I still see my same doctors that I've been going to for the last 20 years? And so my job is to help you navigate that. And the short version of the answer is absolutely. The marketplace here in Utah especially is very open to that. And they base a lot of the factors on the cost of that insurance, on income and family size are usually the two biggest denominators as to what the cost of that insurance might be.
Okay. So, level of coverage, family size, that sort of thing. So, for someone transitioning out of their 9 to 5, going full-time, does Medicaid get involved? Is that an option for most people?
Medicaid could be involved. Medicaid is typically health insurance for someone that doesn't show a lot of income on paper. But generally speaking, Obamacare started maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and Obamacare is simply traditional insurance through local providers like your Select Health, your Cignas, some of these big carriers, and it's just subsidized by the government based on your income. So a lot of new business owners actually land right in the sweet spot to obtain very affordable insurance simply because they have a lot of startup costs. Anytime you start a new business, you can write off the kitchen sink, basically. I mean, you're talking any kind of equipment, those kind of things. Talking to your accountant, they'd be able to explain what you can and can't write off. But a lot of times, the first year, especially when you're trying to get new customers, when you're trying to bring in revenue, the less you make, the more the government is willing to pitch in towards the actual cost of insurance. And so that transition sometimes is a lot brighter than what you might have been told by your neighbor or your friends about how you're in trouble trying to transition and it might not be a good idea. Generally speaking, I would say that you end up coming out ahead and you're pleasantly surprised.
That's interesting. So while health insurance is one of the most common, biggest obstacles that potential entrepreneurs see to them actually going out and starting something, it actually doesn't end up being one most of the time.
It's kind of like anything else. You hear tidbits from Facebook or from your neighbor or from someone who may have gone that route, and it might not always be accurate. And so my job is to help you understand what it is, what variables are actually on the table to be able to obtain the coverage you're looking for. But Utah has really good networks of doctors and hospitals. People are very happy with either Intermountain or the University of Utah Health insurance networks of doctors and hospitals. And even just between those two networks, you can really see good specialists and be able to, generally speaking, see the doctors you've already been going to. And so one of the misconceptions of Obamacare is that it's some kind of government insurance, when really it's not. All it is a subsidized version of private insurance here in Utah. So you're still going to be with Intermountain Healthcare or whatever network that you personally prefer.
Interesting. So people can take that step and they can call you to figure out what it looks like, how much it's going to be. And it sounds like, based on the subsidies, based on the way revenues tend to work when you're first getting started, it's probably not going to be too big of a burden on them. But as things move on, and let's go fast forward a couple of years, the business has grown, they've hired a few employees, they're starting to look at, well, what if I offered health insurance benefits to my employees? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, that's a good problem to have for sure, right? Because that means that you're growing. It means you took that plunge. You're now a business owner. Things are going well. And interestingly, the rule is if you have 50 full-time employees, by law, you have to offer health insurance. But anything under 50 employees, you're not required by law to do that. You can offer that, and oftentimes it's a very good idea to do that, to be able to reel in people that are qualified, that might be wanting to work for you, but they want to know what the health insurance situation looks like as well. And so you can offer that. There's various plans that are out there using the same networks that we talked about. But you as the business owner are going to be on the hook for at least 50% of the cost of their health insurance of all of their employees that take you up on the insurance. So one of the rules that's kind of maybe unfamiliar to someone who might be thinking about offering health insurance to their employees is you can offer it, but you can't just say, hey, here are all the options. This is what it might cost you. Knock yourself out. It's more like, hey, here are your options. I, as the business owner, am going to pay minimum 50%, and then you could pay the other 50%, or I could offer 75% or 100%, anything beyond that. But the law requires that if you do offer group insurance, you have to pitch in 50% of just the employees' portion of all the employees that you choose to put onto that group plan.
That's really interesting. I bet you a lot of people did not know that.
Yeah,
okay.
and it's something to weigh for sure, because the pluses of it is that you can hire people that are looking to obtain health insurance for their family, and they might be concerned that if they came and worked for you and you didn't offer it, that might be a negative. But one of the positives is that, or one of the negatives of offering it is that it could be expensive. You could be looking at a financial amount that maybe weren't on your books prior to that. And so the more employees you get, the more you're pumping into the costs of having employees. And so it's a balance that we just quote out and really help you understand what it is that you may or may not choose to do. But again, under 50, you're not required to. And so that's a question I get a lot too, is do I need to or have to offer insurance for my employees? And not until you're pretty big.
Now, a quick question, that 50 number, is that full-time eligible employees, or is that all employees?
Full-time eligible.
Full-time eligible.
And they're constantly changing the definition of that kind of thing. But for a broad statement, yes.
Subject to change, possibly with or without
Like always. Everything in health insurance, it's always subject to change.
Okay, so for people who are, most of the people that you work with are people who are getting their health care through the exchanges. Is that correct?
I'd say for the most part, yes. Some people can obtain health insurance outside of the exchanges as well. And so your Select Healths or your University of Utah or Cigna plans, they offer plans outside of the exchange. However, you're going to see your best pricing if you land in the income category where you would qualify for a subsidy. If you're above that income threshold, which they use your modified adjusted gross income, is the magic number on your tax forms that they use. If you land in the sweet spot, let's call it, for Obamacare, then that's where you can take advantage of less expensive prices every month for your premiums.
So, and we didn't talk about this before, so this is kind of a curveball.
Sure.
So if you don't feel qualified or comfortable to answer it, totally understand. Just wondering, when is it appropriate, or when would you might maybe recommend someone look at alternative plan styles like an HSA or like a health sharing plan. And I don't know a whole lot of details about those. What are your thoughts?
Sure. A couple of years back, some Christian health share plans came out, which is an alternative altogether from your traditional health insurance. And I think at the beginning, most of those plans tended to work out really well. But I've been getting a lot of feedback over the last year and a half about these plans having difficulty reimbursing the member. And so, And so I've kind of steered them away from that recently, as opposed to pointing them towards that in the past, because they've gone downhill, these Christian health share plans that are outside of your traditional health insurance. Sometimes it's a good fit, but for the most part, I would say I've been leaning against doing those. As far as health savings accounts go, an HSA plan is a really good way to take money, set it aside, and get some tax breaks by setting money aside for an HSA plan. And so that's really what we discuss right out of the gate as we're doing quotes and deciding what's best for each family.
And you work them through that whole process?
Yep. My job is just to help you really understand what I would consider this giant cluster known as health insurance and what it's become over the last 7 or 8 years, and how to navigate that and how to make sure the system doesn't chew you up and spit you out.
So for people who want to get in touch with you to ask you questions or utilize your services, what's the best way to reach out?
Best way to reach out is usually my phone number, which is 801-440-3335, or just reach me by email.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all the time we've got for this segment, but I really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks.
Alrighty, and our next guest is longtime friend and partner of the show, Joe Rangel with 2Evolve Coaching and Consulting. Joe, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So before we get started, you said there was something that you wanted to...
Well, yeah, so coincidentally, I'm here today and you're interviewing Brad Hartley, and Brad Hartley's a dear friend, and he happens to be my insurance agent. And he helped navigate through a bunch of stuff that could have been difficult. So I'd highly recommend him. I know it's a bit out of the ordinary, but it just happened to sequence this way. And so, yeah, I'd highly recommend reaching out to him. He can make navigating the difficulties of the system much more simple.
It's awesome. I've known Brad for a lot of years, and he really does do such a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Man, he does a great job. So today we are talking about a somewhat heavy topic, to quote Marty McFly, and that is depression. And we talked a little bit about the kind of the direction we wanted to go. The first question I want to send your way is, what is the difference between depression and just being sad?
Well, you could even say being depressed. We can have depressive moments. And first off, I'd like to say I'm not a clinician. I'm a coach. I'm a person that helps people through things. But a lot of what I do borders on therapy, borders on counseling. And I have quite a few clients that work through states of depression. So I guess I'd like to, with a precursor, say that sometimes there are clinical reasons that people are depressed. There are chemical imbalances and things like that. I would say for the most part, most of us think we're depressed when we're really just in a bad state of mind for some reason. And I help people through that, understanding that it's a choice. So to me, depression is something that you have no choice over. It's continual, it's nonstop. You're not functional in society. When I talk to people about coaching, the first thing I say is the difference between coaching and therapy is therapy helps you get from dysfunctional to functional, and coaching helps you get from functional to mastery. So if somebody is functioning in society, taking care of kids, holding down a job, things are going relatively well, but they don't just feel great about stuff, there's usually something underlying that's causing that. Does that make sense? And does that answer your question or not quite?
It does. No, that does answer my question. And part of it is trying to figure out, because everybody wants to get better, whether they are suffering from actual clinical depression or whether they are just kind of going through a rough patch. Whatever it is, people want to get better. And I think there's a lot of I would dare hazard a guess that there are misdiagnoses both ways. People who really are suffering from depression who are misdiagnosed as not, and people who aren't suffering from it who are diagnosed with it. And I think helping everyone understand, how can you really tell what is the difference?
So I do think it's important to get with a clinician, you know, and find some things out. I tend to, this is an opinion, so it could be open to a bunch of backlash. But I tend to like to go to a DO, to a doctor of osteopathy. If I go see, because to me a doctor of osteopathy is they're more of a whole body kind of healing.
Osteopathy.
Yeah, so you'll see, so if you've ever been out there, you'll see labels that say DO versus MD.
Oh, okay.
And I've always wondered what that meant, so I started diving in because I never really knew what it meant. I thought, is this really a doctor? But they are doctors. They tend to be more whole body, not all of them. Medical doctors tend to be more focused on like medical solutions, but not all of them. Some medical doctors are very open-minded to things that are outside of the norm. But what I would do is go find out, get some blood work done, find out if there's anything going on. I would be very careful to just have something prescribed to me. I don't believe in that. I think for the most part, a lot of times medications can mask something that's going on instead of truly get to the solution. You know, like if we have a headache, a lot of times we don't try to find out why we have a headache. We just take an Advil or a Tylenol or something. I found a lot of times when I have a headache, if I get up and get a big drink of water, the headache goes away. Now, is that to say that every time I have a headache, I'm dehydrated? Probably not. Could be stress. Could be your eyes. You know, a lot of times people don't know they need to wear glasses, things like that. But very similarly, with depression, I think it's important to find out what's been going on in life. You know, I was actually talking to Brad right before this, and you know, I lost my son back in February to an addictive problem, and I think about him every day. I miss him every day. Do I get depressed about him? No, I don't. Now, was I sad when things happened? Did I have to deal with things? Yes, I did. But I also thought that the best way that I could actually, you know, augment his position in life and dedicate myself to him would be to keep living the best life I can live, keep being the best person I can be, keep helping people. And that's the best way to honor him, in my opinion. Now, other people that have lost people go down a different path through self-medication, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, maybe just staying cooped up and being sad. But so to me, that becomes a choice, and I think it's important to find out if a person has a choice. You know, I work with a lot of people that are depressed, and I ask a lot of questions, like to figure out, I acknowledge them. Number one, like if somebody comes up and says, I'm depressed, and you're like, oh, you're not really depressed, you just had a bad day today. That's really not validating that person. You know, women with kids. My wife has, you know, 4 kids at home. Can be tedious at times. Does she feel depressed at times? Potentially. But is she clinically depressed? Probably not. Although if I sit there and tell her you're not clinically depressed, that doesn't really work. So I ask her questions and ask her what's causing her to feel that, how can she work through things. I think if we're dealing with people that feel depressed, it's important to find out if they do have a choice.
You know,
go ahead.
Can I jump in real quick?
Of course,
Sorry.
of course.
This just brings up a lot of thoughts about the importance of not self-medicating, not masking the problem. I had the same issue, kind of like what you had with headaches. Although it wasn't, for me, it wasn't hydration. I've been good about drinking water for a long time, but I kept getting headaches, and they would sometimes be really severe, sometimes be really mild. But it was almost a daily thing where I was getting headaches and trying to figure out why. You know, and for a while I was just taking an ibuprofen or an Advil or something to make it go away. And then we decided, you know, no, we have to take a look at this. We have to figure this out. And so I went to an eye doctor. My vision is fine. Did research on like blue light because I spend time in front of a monitor a lot. It's like, is that causing the problem? Well, no, it doesn't seem like that's the issue. And then finally just, you know, and this was after weeks of trying to figure out what was going on, I happened upon this article talking about stress and anger-induced headaches. And this was actually in March when all the shutdowns were beginning to happen. And of course my headaches were getting a lot worse. And it was just like, there it is. That's the problem, is the stress and anger-induced headache. So I've got to figure out how to address that. And that was, of course, its own journey. But you know, the idea that you can just hide a problem for a little while and then it's going to go away, I don't think that works.
So when you were feeling that, when you were feeling stressed, how did you de-stress?
That is a long process. My employees actually make fun of me because most of the time when they come in, I've got Celtic spa music playing. And that's one of the ways that just keeps me calm. I mean, as a business owner, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to get very vulnerable right now because I don't feel like it. But as a business owner, you deal with uncertainty at a level that most people cannot comprehend, and you deal with it on a daily basis. You have no clue what's going to come out of left field and knock your business to the side. So you don't really know when that's going to happen, and you're living under that uncertainty all the time. So for me, listening to that Celtic spa music, the reason it comforts me and helps me relax is because it's so easy to predict what's going to happen next. The music is very predictable. It's very repetitive. It's predictable. You know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And it just brings everything down for me.
I think that's beautiful because most people thrive in certainty. And during these times, there's a lot of uncertainty going on, you know, whether it be the news. It doesn't really matter what the topics are. I agree with you on today. It was probably not a good day to pick anything that would be potentially controversial. But but no, I think that's perfect because so music is a way to change your state of being. Like if you chose to come in and listen while you're all angsty and listen to Limp Bizkit or Linkin Park or something, it might make you a little bit more angsty. You know, even though you like the music and know the music, it still can make you a little bit more agitated. Listen to something peaceful is a way to change your state of being. Now, having said that, if you had said you were depressed and you could change your state of being by listening to music, would you be clinically depressed?
I don't know.
Well, you made a choice, right? You had a choice. You listened to music and you changed the way you felt. A lot of times when I get on a call with somebody, they'll tell me that they're depressed about something or they've gotten really worked up about something. And I'll start asking questions and then through an hour, you know, get to the end of the call and say, do you feel better? I do. Do you feel happier? I do. So do you think you're clinically depressed? No. Then they'll say that. Because they couldn't, if they were clinically depressed, nothing that I could talk them through or say to them would have made a difference. They would have stayed in that space. So that's how I look at things. If somebody stays in that space, then I actually recommend they get professional help. You know, I'm very cautious about masking symptoms. In the state of Utah, we have one of the highest prescribed prescriptions, I guess, our prescribed uses of antidepressants in the world. And I think we have to be really careful that we're not just hiding a symptom underneath a medication.
Better to deal with it and then...
Yeah, if you can. Yeah, if you can. Now, if you find out that you can't, then there's probably things that need to be done. But they can be adjusted through lifestyle, through diet, through what you found, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, if you tend to be more agitated, drinking more Diet Coke or Mountain Dew is probably not going to help you make your headache go away. Unless you're addicted to the caffeine, and then it could make the headache go away. So there can be lots of underlying causes. What I find, though, is if we can make a shift on our own because of our choices, then we're probably not clinically depressed.
I love that. So we got to wrap it up. Best way to contact you?
Again, like Brad said, through phone. You can reach me at 801-850-2974. I welcome text. I welcome phone calls. You can go to my website, which is the number 2, evolvecoaching.com, and you can actually set up an appointment directly there. But I welcome conversations and disagreements and anything. So
that's what makes you great, Joe. That's why we love you.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. Alrighty, and our last guest today is Jesse Redbeard Smith with Red's Plumbing. Jesse, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
Okay, so it's not often that we get a plumber on the show, so I'm going to hit you with a lot of questions that have been driving me nuts for a while.
Let's do it.
But first, let's talk a little bit about your company. What is it that your company does?
So I'm a solo man. I'm just running by myself right now. Started, veteran-owned, operated, was in the Army. We focus on residential service. We do a little bit of commercial, remodels, gas lines, water heaters, softeners, pretty much anything you have at your house, I can take care of for you.
If it's connected to a pipe, you've got it.
We've got it taken care of.
All right, okay, cool. So you do a lot of residential then.
Yes.
So you end up in a lot of houses.
Yep.
So what are some things that you've seen that catch homeowners by surprise, that maybe they're not expecting?
Well, the main thing really is Water heaters, I probably would say. The biggest shock, it's something that sits down in the basement. You know, you don't think about it, you turn the faucet on, you have hot water. You know, you take a shower, you have hot water. Until you don't have that hot water, something's wrong, you know, everything's running good. So when you walk down, first of all, you need to know where your shut-off valves are, if they're functioning, make sure that everything is, you know, properly working. If some emergency does happen, your water heater's flooding out, your basement's going, you're getting wet, know where to shut things off. I think that would be the biggest key.
Ooh,
know
okay.
how to shut it off and get it shut down so you can give us a call, you know. The biggest thing I would think would be maintenance of your water heater is huge that people don't really know or think about.
How do you, what is the maintenance for a water heater?
So a maintenance for a water heater consists of, you know, there's a valve, most of the time there's a valve right on top. It closes the hot water system down, so there's no water coming into the water heater. You shut that, you open up the little drain that's on the bottom.
Okay.
You hook a hose to it if there's a drain close by. Hopefully you have one. Some houses do, some houses don't. Yearly maintenance is to flush that out. So turn the water off, open up the valve, and just let all that stuff flow out. You can turn the water on and kind of get that water to stir up in there. So what happens is there's sediment on the bottom of the water heater that collects, and that's what causes your water heater to rust out faster.
Okay.
So if you're flushing that out, then you get less likely of a chance that it will rust out.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's water heater maintenance. You got to flush it once a year, get that sediment out, stop it from rusting. So here's a question I've had for a long time.
Okay.
Water softener.
Okay.
If you don't keep it stocked with salt, does it cause problems for any other aspect of your plumbing system?
No. So if you forget to put salt in it, it's basically just going to run water through the softener, but it's not going to regenerate it and put salt in to soften the water. So you basically have a unit that's sitting there ready to soften the water that just does not soften the water.
Just kind of doing it, just not doing anything. It's just
Pretty
passing
much.
right through.
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know. 'Cause
Yep.
I'm pretty forgetful with that.
There goes on the maintenance list. Water heater flush, softener salt.
Yes,
and
exactly.
it's pretty cheap. You know, the salt is fairly cheap. You go to the store and buy it, it's like $2.50 a bag. Buy a few, you know, maintenance schedule, just throw it in. It doesn't have to be empty. You can fill it up and it's full. Put a bag in every couple months and you're good to go.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's water heaters and that's water softeners.
Yep.
Do you do a lot with drains?
Drains, yeah. We get those calls a lot. We you know, the main things that we get called on, say my tub's backed up, it's slow drain. You know, we get in there, snake it out. A lot of times people think, oh, I've just dumped Drano down my drain and it doesn't seem to touch it. Well, there's reasons that it's not touching it because Drano is marketed towards a quick fix. You know, sometimes there's something underlying that you got to get in there and take care of. Drano, I don't tend to recommend that. Yeah, most of the time you got to run the snake down it. There could be something underlying that's a little further past the trap. Gotcha. Sometimes the P-trap just gets clogged up, hair, gunk, soap scum, the nasty stuff that we don't like to think about, but it's part of the deal. Can get clogged in there and cause issues. So.
Now, is there a difference between, so what about when like a sink is draining slowly? Like it's still draining, it's just draining slowly. Is that a situation for Drano or is that still a snake situation?
Could be, Drano I don't recommend using at all.
Ever?
No,
Okay.
Just try to avoid that stuff because it can send more stuff down and kind of get it more clogged, but it just doesn't really work very well.
Okay.
So if you have a slow drain, check your P-trap first. That's probably what's going on. There could just be some hair or something stuck down in there.
Okay.
Especially with tubs, there's a little thing that's down where the pop-up kit is.
Yeah.
That tends to get hair stuck in there really easily, and it's kind of designed to catch the hair. So if you undo that, you can take that off, and the hair's usually right there.
Okay.
And you take that out, and that will 9 out of 10 fix the problem, unless there's something further down.
Now I've got a quiz question for you.
All right.
Scenario.
Okay.
Totally hypothetical. Let's say your bathroom sink. Okay, this isn't hypothetical. This is me. So my bathroom sink was draining really slow, and I wasn't really paying too much attention to it. Like it was still draining okay, so I wasn't worried about it. But I had turned the hot water on because it's pretty far from the water heater, so it takes time to actually heat up. And I lost track of time. Was doing something else, and in the bathroom. And you know the water was getting higher and higher, and then all of a sudden, with all that, the water was really, really hot. All of a sudden, it just kind of broke through and started draining normally.
Yeah.
What happened?
So there's probably some buildup, soap scum buildup, and that hot water just helped loosen it all up and send it down.
You literally scalded it away.
You did good.
Yeah, look at me. I'm getting my plumber license next.
That could have been the soap scum that was just stuck in the trap. There comes back to where the first thing you want to do is take the trap apart and see if there's stuff inside there.
So that was a situation where it was probably more likely that the buildup was due to like soap scum or maybe toothpaste, or
could be,
as opposed to something more solid like hair.
Yep.
Okay, that explains. That makes sense.
And kids are awesome for throwing stuff down the sink. That happens a lot. Down the toilets.
That's why our bathtub got clogged one time. We weren't sure what was going on, so we had someone snake it out, and he came out and he did exactly what you described. He picked up, put his hand in, and he pulled out, I don't remember what it was, but it's just a small toy.
Little toy. Yeah, a little rubber toy, probably.
And it was covered in hair. It was like just this horrific nightmare of a toy. So, okay. So drains, water heaters, we've gone over water softeners. What about toilets?
Toilets. So they're pretty you're going to get a huge, vast difference of a super cheap toilet and a super high-end toilet. They all clog.
Okay.
There's nothing you're going to be able to. Kids clog toilets, super fast. Really, there's just a few things. You plunge them first. Try to plunge it first thing. People will call you, oh, my toilet's clogged. Did you try to plunge it? Oh, no. Try it first. If not, usually we can get it with just the snake. Clean it out. There's something just stuck within the trap that's built in the toilet. Usually if it's a little further down the line, then it's a little more extensive. But
gotcha. Okay. So I want to quiz you on proper plunging technique, because I don't have a super great success rate when I try to plunge a toilet, but I don't know if that's really good content for this discussion.
We could talk about that after the fact.
Yeah, we can do the potty humor after the show.
Yeah.
Venture Utah After Dark.
There you go.
So toilets, so you're telling me that the really expensive toilets aren't made of a more slippery porcelain?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, so they
do tend to flush a little bit better. So you pay for a little better toilet, you're gonna get a better flushing toilet. But
so now
they don't build toilets to not clog. They are going to clog sometime. Sure. If you put enough toilet paper down there, kids are most culprit for that. They will clog. So, and that's where your plunging comes in.
So
invest in a good plunger. That would be a good recommendation.
And a good husband, as the case may be. Okay, so is there something that people can look for if there may be, like if the pressure just kind of drops in their house?
Yeah, so we have what's called a pressure regulator valve. Most of the time they come into the house as soon as you wear your main water shutoff valve. If you don't know where that is, I'd recommend finding it. Okay. Because it's something that usually if you're not using it a lot, they'll seize up and they won't be able to turn off when you need them to turn off. So your only option after that is going out to the meter and turning a meter off. So what happens with that pressure regulator, sometimes they just get too much pressure and they'll break. So they'll allow either too much pressure or they'll limit the pressure. So maintenance, just put a regulator or a pressure gauge on your hose bib, and that'll tell you kind of what pressure you're at. We generally like a pressure in your house but between 50 to 65 pounds. Okay. So if you're above that, then you got something going on, or maybe you don't even have one. A lot of these older houses didn't even have one. So. Wow,
interesting. Okay, so my house probably does not have one. I'm fairly sure I know where the main valve is, and if it's the one I'm thinking of, then it does not have a regulator on it. Yep. But I'm actually not 100% sure. I'll have to test that.
Yep, check it out.
Okay, so final question, and this is just, are there any plumbing-related services or things that people might lump in with plumbing that you don't actually provide, like sprinklers?
Yes, I get a lot of that call. So I get people say, "Oh, I got this problem in my house. Also, do you do anything with sprinklers?" I said, "Well, I know how to do them, but I generally try to steer away from them." Sure. Landscapers are great sprinkler guys. I will do them if it gets bad enough, but yeah, that's one thing I get a call about. HVAC. I generally don't. A lot of plumbers do get lumped in with the HVAC side because they market those bigger companies. They market towards electricians, HVAC, and plumbing. Sure. Me personally, I don't. I just stick to the plumbing. Nice. So those are probably two of the biggest things I get lumped in.
Okay, good to know. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do it?
So let's Facebook, we're at Red's Plumbing. Google, we're on there, and just give me a call on my cell. We're actually a 602 area code. We lived in Arizona for a spell, so 602-750-9602.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jesse.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for being with us this week on Venture Utah. We will catch you next week at the same time.